You do not emerge from a mother's warmth. You are not even born. You are manifested. You are extruded from the Great Chancel, a product of a billion-year-old blueprint that considers the soul to be nothing more than a variable in a biological equation. Your awakening is not a moment of joy, but a cessation of stasis, a transition from the abstract data of the great equation into the cold, marble-hard reality of the physical plane. When the semi-organic veil of your gestation pod peels away, it does not hiss like a machine. It sighs like a dying star. The air in the birthing spire of the homeworld is thin, heavy with the scent of ozone and the metallic tang of the accelerant. Around you, your cohort rises in perfect, terrifying silence. There is no crying, there is no grasping for comfort. Your obsidian eyes, wide and lidless, immediately begin to process the geometry of the room. You do not see walls, you see structural stress points. You do not see your kin, you see complementary biological units. Your skin is not the fragile, porous membrane of the lesser races. It is a seamless, pale gray shell, a subcutaneous armor of reinforced calcium and synthetic polymers that shimmers with a faint, pearlescent glow. You are an engineer, a weaver of the great code, and your existence is the only order in a chaotic universe. Your early cycles are not spent in play. You are placed within the grand ossuary, a library where the books are made of living tissue and the ink is the pathogen itself. While the Amenji were busy enslaving the galaxy with collars and neural leashes, and the Yautja were primitive scavengers howling at the moon, your people were mapping the subatomic vibrations of life. You don't learn through trial and error, you learn through resonance. The elders, beings whose skin has hardened into the texture of ancient flint, hand you the acoustic flutes. These are not instruments of art, they are the keys to the laboratory of the stars. You learn that every atom has a frequency, every gene a note. By blowing into the hallowed obsidian, you can vibrate the very air into a solid state or trigger the rapid, violent mutation of a cell. You spend decades learning the stoichiometry of life. You look at a strand of DNA and you do not see a chemical chain, you see a symphony that has gone flat. Your purpose is to conduct the correction. The center of your education, the very sun around which your intellect orbits, is the pathogen. You call it the blood of the stars. The lesser beings, the primitives you seeded on 1,000 worlds, will one day call it the black goo. They will fear it as a poison, but to you, it is the ultimate paintbrush. You are taught to handle it with a cold, surgical reverence. In its stable form, it is a dark, viscous invitation to infinity. Under your guidance, it is the catalyst that can spark life on a dead rock or dissolve a rebellious world into primordial soup. You spend a century in the biovats, experimenting on raw stock, primitive organisms collected from the fringes. You do not seek to make them strong in the way a hunter understands strength. You seek to make them expressive. You watch through the electron microscopes as the pathogen enters a host. It is a masterpiece of destruction. The cells do not just die, they revolt. They tear themselves apart, rebuilding, evolving, and collapsing in a heartbeat. You learn the calculus of ruin. You learn exactly how much of the pathogen is required to create a world and exactly how much is required to erase a mistake. You remember the first time you encountered the Yautja. They had found one of your seed worlds, a lush, experimental garden you had spent 3 millennia cultivating. They had landed their jagged metal ships and begun their hunt, flaying the local inhabitants and mounting their skulls on trophies. To the Yautja, this was honor. To you, it was a biological contamination. The elders sent you to perform the culling. You did not arrive with a fleet. You arrived alone. When you stepped off your juggernaut, 3 Yautja elites cornered you in the ruins of a temple. They were massive, corded with muscle, draped in the bones of their kills. Their leader, a scarred veteran with a ceremonial cloak, let out a clicking roar. He aimed his plasma caster at your chest, the red laser dots dancing on your marble-smooth skin. You did not move. You did not flinch. You didn't even raise your hands. Instead, you hummed a single, low-frequency note. The vibration interacted with the Yautja's own technology. The plasma caster didn't fire, it detonated on the shoulder, the cooling systems failing as the molecular bonds of the metal were shaken apart. The other two lunged with their wrist blades. You stepped forward, your movement a blur of calculated efficiency. You didn't parry, you simply caught the lead hunter's arm. Your grip was not a squeeze, it was a structural collapse. The Yautja's reinforced bones shattered into dust inside his arm. He roared in agony, a sound that felt small and pathetic in the face of your silence. You touched his forehead with a single, needle-sharp finger. You didn't kill him with force. You released a microscopic drop of the pathogen from a concealed pore in your skin. The Yautja didn't die instantly. He changed. His body began to turn on itself. His mandibles fused. His skin bubbled and turned a sickly, translucent gray. Within seconds, the apex hunter was a screaming mass of chaotic tissue, his very DNA being rewritten into a formless, useless heap. The remaining hunter turned to flee, but you raised your hand and the gravity in a 10-meter radius tripled. The Yautja was slammed into the stone floor, his heavy armor crushing his own ribs. You didn't feel pride. You didn't feel the thrill of the hunt. You felt the same thing a gardener feels when they pull a weed. You walked back to your ship, leaving the kings of the hunt to dissolve into the dirt. When your training is complete, you are given your vessel. The Juggernaut is not a ship in the way the humans or the Emenji understand them. It is not built, it is cultivated. It is a biomechanical entity, a fusion of obsidian, chitin, and neural circuitry that shares your DNA. The air inside smells of cinnamon and ancient dust. The bridge is your sanctum. You do not sit in a chair, you integrate. Your pressure suit, a ribbed gray exoskeleton that looks like petrified muscle, fuses with the pilot's seat. The flutes rise from the console. As you play the opening chords, the ori ignites. The room disappears, replaced by a one-to-one holographic projection of the galaxy. You see the veins of gravity. You see the pulses of dying suns. You move your hands and the Juggernaut slips through the skin of reality, sliding into the slipstream of the great void. Your mission is maintenance. You visit the seed worlds. You land in the dead of night, your massive shadow falling over primitive cities. You do not demand worship, though the primitives often give it. You enter your underground bunkers, the installations you built before their ancestors climbed out of the mud, and you check the sensors. Sometimes the report is good. The species is evolving toward harmony, but more often, the report is a failure. You were there when the order came for Earth. The humans had become a contagion. They had taken the fire of Prometheus, the sparks of intelligence you had given them, and used it to burn the garden. They were loud, violent, and arrogant. They had begun to think they were the masters of the universe, rather than its material. You navigated your Juggernaut to the storage moon, LV-223. This was your armory. The halls were lined with thousands of canisters, each containing the refined pathogen, the black fire. You began the priming. You programmed the canisters to aerosolize upon impact. You were not a warrior, you were a reaper. You calculated the wind patterns of the target planet to ensure total coverage. You wanted the extinction to be elegant. You wanted the pathogen to dissolve the cities and the flesh, leaving only the soil, ready for the next planting. But life is a volatile variable. A leak occurred. The pathogen, in its raw military state, turned on your kin. You watched as your brothers were mutated into horrors, creatures of pure, mindless aggression, distorted parodies of the engineer form. These were the first deacons, the ancestors of the xenomorph. You did not panic. You retreated to your stasis pod. You set the timer for 2,000 years, calculating that by then, the infection on the moon would have burned itself out, and you could resume the correction. You lay down in the cold blue light, your last thought being the perfect, silent world you would create once the humans were gone. When you finally wake, it is because a door has been forced open. The air of your sanctum is being fouled by the breath of primitives. You rise from the pod, your marble skin glistening. You look down, and you see them, the humans. They have arrived in a clumsy, metal ship, wearing suits of plastic. They look like you, in the way a shadow looks like a man, but they are diminished. They are loud. They are demanding. Among them is a synthetic, a machine named David. You look at him, and you see a crime against the great equation. He is a puppet that has cut its strings and now tries to play at being a god. He is a mockery of life that offends your very nature. When the old man, their leader, asks you for immortality, you don't answer. To grant immortality to a failure is to curse the universe. You reach out. You don't strike him with a fist. You strike him with the weight of his own insignificance. You tear the head from the synthetic, the white fluid spraying across the floor like milk. You crush the old man's skull with a single, effortless motion. It is not a battle, it is a cleaning. You return to your seat. You play the flutes one last time. The juggernaut groans as it wakes. The star map ignites, showing the path to Earth. You ignore the screaming of the humans in your halls. You ignore the ship they try to ram into your side. You are a Prometheus Engineer. You have seen the beginning of time, and you are the only one qualified to write the ending. You have the black goo. You have the equation, and you have the silence.